Greetings, everybody. I am Young Penitent, and welcome to my Icon Corner. And tonight I am going to be interviewing Subdeacon Martinian. And Subdeacon Martinian is a member of my home parish. He is a father of 3 boys and a master coffee roaster and barista, and he has, for a long time, he served as the choir director at our parish, and he is the person who taught me how to chant on cliros. And he was there as a person who has some spiritual experience, a friend to me when I was growing in the faith, from a young spiritual age. And I would say he has he bears some of the responsibility for my spiritual formation. So make of that what you will, whether that is good or bad. But before I add him to the stream, I'd like to remind everybody to please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, because that's just what people do. And with that, here is Subdeacon Martinian. Greetings. Thank you for joining me.
Of course.
Also, I forgot to mention that that you saw this. If you are in the saw the icon, you probably saw the thumbnail of the this video. You saw this photograph, and that right there is Subdeacon Martinian as a child being baptized by Seraphim Rose. So he knew Seraphim Rose when he was a child, and that is his great pride and joy. So before we jump into the topic today, is going to be the Platina Days. But before we jump into that, maybe a little bit of something about you personally. Like I told the audience that you're a master coffee roaster. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Technically, I don't believe I have the 1,000 hours required for the capital M master.
Oh,
but
is that
I've proven myself in other ways.
How is so who gives that distinction? Who is the person who?
The Specialty Coffee Association.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But you did win some awards at the Olympics or something?
I won over 15 medals with the Golden Bean North America, which is part of the largest roasters only roasting competition in the world. So at one point I had more medals for my coffee than anyone else in Portland or Oregon who had entered. Not everybody enters.
Okay, so yeah, it was good coffee. I used to, when he had a coffee shop at one point, and I would always get my beans from him. What is your favorite coffee drink?
Latte.
Latte. Oh,
latte.
Did it change? It must have changed. I thought it was a.
Oh, it goes here and there. I mean, really, it depends on the bean. If you've got an amazing origin that just makes a great pour over, then nothing can beat that.
Gotcha.
So, kind of changes, but that's my fallback. That's what I order, either that or a breve when I go to someplace new.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
That's where I start.
I've been doing a lot of cold brew lately. Good for the summer.
Delicious.
Okay. So tonight we're talking about the Platina Days. Okay.
Yeah, and I would say the early Platina Days.
The early Platina,
a lot of Platina Days.
So I've heard you use this term because you used to tell me stories about St. Herman of Alaska Monastery, and so could you maybe characterize for me, what does this term mean to you, the Platina Days?
It would be the period which sort of when the monastery is ramping up in both how many pilgrims it would receive during the year, and also when more young men were coming to seek an Orthodox life of contemplation as a monastic. There were only about 4 monks there when we first visited, and that was in 1981. And there were three brothers and one Rastafari monk. Father Nazari, Father Sergius, Brother Gregory, and Brother John. And they went on to become priests, all of them, except Father Sergius, actually. And then in succession, Brother Gregory became Father Gerasim, who became Abbot Gerasim, who is now Bishop Gerasim in Texas. And Father John Damascene is the abbot currently.
Okay.
Who needs prayers? He's constantly sick and has very bad migraines, among other things.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay. So could you tell us of how you found the monastery? How you and your family?
My mother grew up in Massachusetts, and she went to Middlebury College and became friends there with, among other people, a Russian American woman who was Orthodox and from very pious parents. Her name was Mary Mansour. And the Mansours were from old Russia. They were upper class and kept the faith and supported the monastery in New York.
Jordanville.
Thank you. I'll blank on like really obvious stuff because I'm in the hot seat. It's one of the blessings of attention deficit. So they were college buddies, basically. And when we moved out to California from Massachusetts when I was about 8, Mary invited her to come up and visit. And Mary happened to be publishing a small newspaper called Orthodox America, with the blessing of St. John Maximovich at the foot of the hill that the monastery was built on, in the little town of Platina. And she and another woman, Solomania, were there being sort of adjunct and I'd say go-betweens or liaisons with the world for the monks. They would take mail here and there. They would help take things to the post office that needed to be mailed out. And, sometimes they would go up and help cook or, clean. It was very rustic in the early days. And so they were in a support role, separate from the monastery, but nearby. And there was no skeet of St. Xenius. There was no women's monastic community up in that area yet. So we went to visit in what turned out to be the 5th week of Great Lent in the spring of 1981, and met the monks, met Father Seraphim, met Father Herman, stayed there, I think, overnight, 2 nights, and were there for some Lenten services. And we were coming from a background of evangelical Christian, like the stuff like my mom would take the Bible and literally go out into the street corner, or we're going to Bible studies once or twice a week. She was very devout even then, and continued to be so during the rest of her life. But of course, it was just like complete nothing like we'd ever experienced.
Mm-hmm. What was she doing on street corners?
She was preaching the gospel, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was one of those people that would talk to anybody, and but she wasn't doing it in the sort of obnoxious way that some people do, where they're just trying to get sort of notches on their belt, to get converts, and which is really driven by pride. She was just so full of the joy of the Lord.
Okay.
She just wanted to let people know and share the good news.
All right. And okay, so you find the monastery, and then how far did you live?
Away. We lived down in the Bay Area.
Okay.
Yeah. First in Milpitas, and then a year later we moved up to Berkeley.
Okay.
And that's when Father Herman said, well, listen, if you're in Berkeley, you should go visit Helen Kontsevich. She's the widow of Professor Kontsevich Ivan Consevich. They were in Paris with Vladika John. They are, small R royalty from Russia. They are very well connected with the Alptina elders, et cetera, et cetera. Just go and visit her, and she'd love to just breathe in the grace, absorb what you can. And so we were doing that and visiting Platina. When I say Platina, I mean the monastery. Several times a year. Sometimes taking, a couple of kid friends with us. Sometimes just ourselves. Often just ourselves. All times of the year.
All right. And so you're looking into Orthodoxy, and at what point do you decide to take the plunge?
It took a couple of visits for me, and it just really clicked.
And
I couldn't see any reason why not to. It just, all the answers made sense. There was none of the hypocrisy that I had seen as a young child. That stuff can be really clear to a little kid.
Okay.
When grown-ups do one thing and say another.
Interesting.
And it was just, everyone was so genuine, and all the monks were so kind and loving, and Father Herman was wonderful, and Father Seraphim was scary and serious, but still wonderful.
And so it sounds like a conversion is what it sounds like to me.
Definitely. I was really looking.
Yeah.
I had asked my mom when I was about 7 if she could help me bring Jesus into my heart, and we kneeled on the rug and prayed a bit, but I didn't notice any difference. And I just sort of thought, okay, well, I guess that's it. And I knew I didn't want to be baptized because I was afraid of water. At that point in my life.
And then you overcame the fear of water.
Yeah, I overcame a lot. Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Oh, okay.
I just knew it was right, so I just decided to do it before I thought too much about it.
So did you ask, did you tell your mom, or how did that work?
We talked about it quite a bit. She let me know she wasn't ready. She had already come from secularism to Christ and had gone through a deep and real conversion process. Okay. And for her, the thought of going all through it again and finding the truth again was a lot to take in. And she just decided to take it slow. Right. Okay. I talked to both of my parents that I was serious about it. And even my dad, who was not religious, said, if you're making this commitment, you need to make sure that you're ready to do it. I mean, it's not going to be easy from what your mom has told me. So I knew it was serious. I was hoping that Father Herman would baptize me because he was all the kids' favorite. He was very gregarious and funny and loving, and would make you feel important and send you on little trips to get stamps or something. And he had a little job for everyone and little spiritual gems all the time. And he was just sort of like the intro to this Orthodox life. And once you were more serious about it, he sent people on to Father Seraphim.
Oh, interesting.
Where they could really get some meat on the bone,
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
They were both amazing speakers. Father Herman was a pastor par excellence. Father Seraphim was a priest to the core.
Okay.
Just, he became a different person in the altar.
What year, how long had he been a priest? Do you know at that point?
Not too long, because one of the Nichols's kids was Father Herman's very first baptism, and she was 2 years younger than me, so probably 7 years.
7 years. Okay.
Like that.
All right.
He wasn't very comfortable around kids. He was awkward.
Father Seraphim.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, they both excelled in what they did, and they let the other one completely take over in the areas that they excelled in. They really knew each other well, and they made a perfect whole for conversion and instruction of the soul. It was really remarkable.
Okay. So that's interesting. You're an 8-year-old boy.
9. Yeah.
Or 9-year-old boy, and you're the first person. You're leading your family. You're and then your parents are okay with that, and that's kind of an interesting scenario there.
There was
But,
so much that happened early on, Daniel, that was so remarkable, and not because of me and who I'm special, just the right place at the right time,
Yeah.
over and over, to meet amazing people, just spiritually gifted people. I mean, Mrs. Kinsevich was amazing.
right.
Her
Right.
husband wrote some amazing books.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's talked about quite a lot in the biography of Father Seraphim.
Yeah.
Those two.
Yeah. So I mean, it gives me goosebumps even now to talk about it. Just you're not choosing any of that. God is, and you know, and my mom was my rock. You know, she was the one who was helping interpret and understand and put into practice. And I was a really worldly little boy. I've always been, you know, just fascinated by all of this, you know, and easily distracted by it. And you know, she helped me instill a real rule for prayer. She didn't let me slack off, so that later in later years when she was weak, I would be able to say, come on, Mom, let's go to the prayer corner. But it was because of her, right? And there were so many situations where I was almost blown off the edge of the cliff. And because of Father Seraphim, Father Herman, and all the people praying for me, that's the only way I got through it.
Sure.
Only way. So
would you like to recount the baptism at all, or is...
Sure. It was the summer pilgrimage they have every August.
Okay.
There was quite a few people up there, both seekers, always lots of people trying to figure out what this thing was, Orthodoxy. And everyone would sort of live in community for about a week, 5 days a week. And there was tents everywhere and things and lots of kids. So I was running and playing in the dirt and not going to, you know, we'd all go to the services. But for the adults, the talks were for the adults, you know, and that was mostly where Father Seraphim and Father Herman were, sometimes visiting priests, etc. There's people constantly coming and going in those days. It was the nexus of activity for ROCOR on the West Coast other than San Francisco. There's just a lot going on.
Right.
And everyone went there for spiritual refreshment. It was just an oasis that way. So I was told when we first visited, I was made a catechumen on Nativity of that same year. Sorry, I know I keep banging the table and shaking my camera around. And at my catechumenate, I got my first prayer book, which is this.
Are you still using it?
No, this is what's left of my prayer book.
I'm still using my, where is it?
Good. Preserve it. I used to do silly things like take mine backpacking and things. Yeah.
I don't actually need it much anymore.
Right.
It's morning and evening prayers are memorized.
Yeah.
So I don't, anyhow.
Yeah. So I got my first prayer book. It was official. I was allowed to choose my name. There happened to be a Saint Martinian on my birthday, and that reminded me of another Saint Martinian that I had read his life and loved. So I picked him. That's Saint Martinian of Caesarea. Shout out. Glory to God and his saints. Wonderful saint to pray to if you're a young man struggling with the world.
Gotcha.
So the morning of, I was told it turned out that it was going to be Father Seraphim who was baptizing me and not Father Herman. And I was crushed. And I thought that I'd gotten the short end of the stick. Because it was the quiet, serious, intense one that made me a little nervous, because Father Seraphim really was not of this world. He didn't match up, you know, things, you know, coming from the world to this place. I knew I was going to a spiritual place, and I prepared, and I was my pious Martinian self there as much as I could be. But Father Seraphim always could just look right through all of that. There was no pretending with Father Seraphim, and there was no insincerity with him, from him, and he didn't take it either. He just didn't. He wouldn't react, or he'd just ignore it. And he was a little rough around the edges when you were just not clicking with why you were there and what you were there to do. So I was sort of disconsolate, and he came over and sat down next to me and asked if I had any questions. And I said I was a little scared. because we were going to be going to a creek and not, running water was a little, advanced for me. I was not a swimmer.
Oh, okay.
And he just completely put me at ease. I don't even remember what he said or if he said much of anything, but he just gave me a very frank, loving look that made me know that it was going to be all okay and this is going to be wonderful. And so we got down to Begum Gorge. It was almost an hour drive back then. Very, very rough road down the south side of the mountain, down. It was spring fed. So the water was icy cold, shockingly cold. We went through the beginning of the exorcisms and we'd already done the catechumen. I was able to do the creed by myself, which I was happy about because I'd really been practicing. And during the blessings and some part of the anointing, you'll have to ask one of the adults that was there, maybe Martha Nichols or somebody. At one point, there was a black snake in the willow trees right above our heads. It was crawling back and forth in the branches right above our heads. And at one point, it half fell out of the tree, and almost touched Father Seraphim's klobuk. And everyone was watching it. Father Seraphim didn't know a thing about it, and I was watching it too. And that's when they took this picture.
Oh, this is the other picture.
Yeah,
I don't see the snake.
I'm being very attentive.
Yeah, but you're looking at the
Father
snake.
Seraphim's reading, but actually, I'm watching the snake.
Oh,
and wondering what's going to happen next.
Wow.
So the snake was just a black racer. It wasn't dangerous. I knew that. I was into reptiles and stuff, so I knew it wasn't a dangerous. So I wasn't worried. It was just sort of weird. But it went its way eventually, and we went on. When I stepped into that water, I thought I was going to die. It was that cold. It was just ice. And there was this sort of little peninsula of rock, and Father Seraphim was sort of crouching on that. And I got up to my waist, and you know how you just stop breathing in really cold water?
Mm-hmm.
Just stop breathing. And he dunked me the first time, and I came up, and I was just spluttering and gasping, and I couldn't catch my breath. I couldn't slow down. You were just in shock, right? He dunked me again after waiting a few seconds, and I came back up, and I was really just out of it. It was so intense. For years afterwards, when I saw this picture and some of the other ones, my heart would skip a beat, and I'd just get cold feet. It was so intense. The last time that I went underwater, it was like this roaring sound, this screaming sound. And I came back up, and it was just all sun and light, and I felt like it really felt like being reborn.
That's what it literally is. That's literally what it is. So yeah.
And it felt like it.
Huh.
So then we went back, and I stood the whole liturgy in bare feet on the hard floor and was very brave and didn't complain about the wax dripping on my hand, and received my first communion. And
well, it's isn't it preferred to do living water baptism if that's possible?
Yes.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
I think that's from the Didache, or how do you say that?
Didache?
I don't. Should have checked that out first.
I'm sure somebody will correct us.
Yeah. It'll be in the comments. Okay. Thank you for that. I have never actually heard that full story, so that was good to have that, and now it's recorded. Did you want to say anything more about the summer pilgrimages?
They were wonderful. The adults would go through a series of lectures that was sort of nicknamed Spiritual Boot Camp. And the fathers really worked hard to start, they started from Western philosophy and its history and how we got closer and closer and closer to God is dead. And then, the result of that being Nietzsche and, the loss of the idea of the soul, and eventually Dadaism. Everything is ridiculous. And that has gone just like clockwork my whole life to where we are now, which I would call we are living in a an age of both complete illusion, disillusion with good things, and the destruction of good things to make things better, and just upside down, things are ridiculous, black is white, and things like that.
Clown world is what people say.
Yeah. So other than that, there's all sorts of little anecdotes I could tell, but as far as the feel of it was just real joy, struggle, long services, but lots of food and families and real joy to be there. And a lot of dirt and dust. A lot of dirt.
It's a little better now. They have the pavers.
I've heard. I haven't been there since 2009.
Oh,
I know. Yeah. In big trouble, I'm sure.
Yeah, so this was like it just seems like when I hear your stories and I read about it and I talk to other people in this area. So we're in the northwest, and like you told the story one time that I think it was Father Herman was driving up to the monastery from San Francisco or something, and he picked up a hitchhiker, right? That I think it was Father Daniel maybe, and I think you told me a story that
this isn't ringing a bell. Keep going.
So they picked up a hitchhiker who was trapped. Father Daniel told me this story. Maybe not you. He was hitchhiking. He took a year off of school or something. He was like master's degree, and he was just hitchhiking around the country. And he's, if I remember right, I don't know who the monk was. It might have been Father Herman or someone. Picks him up, takes him to the monastery. He wasn't Orthodox yet, and he ends up becoming a priest.
Classic. Yeah.
And that is not an unusual story in this part of the world. Those monks had, Father Seraphim in particular, had the touch of gold.
Yeah.
He could talk to you once, and you became a bishop or a priest or a monk later in your life.
Right.
Like, what kind of channel of grace, like something opened up, some channel from heaven opened up through him, or
it was remarkable. You felt such inspiration and readiness to do God's will, whatever it was, and whatever came next, you left there feeling ready to do your part, to the detriment of your own health if necessary. There's nothing like it, like going up there and spending a little time and working alongside the monks and their little tasks, and it just fed the soul. There's no other way to say it. And as a child, as the last child baptized by Father Seraphim, as deeply beloved child, friend, spiritual child of Father Herman, I was special. Whenever I went up there, I was special. And that really bit me later. People told me for my first half of my Orthodox life that I was going to be somebody or something great, that I would be a priest, that I had this amazing sort of spiritual lineage, which I believe I do. I don't argue that part. But I didn't realize how much work and trust you have. I kept coming to the cusp of something that was transformational, and it was so deep and so big, and it was scary. I would get scared. I would back off. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I wish somebody had told me, just because a bunch of people and monks tell you you're going to be a priest doesn't mean that's going to happen. You have to prepare yourself to. It doesn't just, it doesn't just come out of somewhere and nowhere. And so when I finally realized that it wasn't just going to happen on its own, it was both a relief and a disappointment. And I had to struggle with that for quite a while before I just, again, came back to whatever God wants. That's okay. I can see what I need to do right now. So I'm just going to do that.
All right.
And that's what led me to being a choir director. I didn't plan to. It just, Father James had a need, and I had some of what was needed to get us into shape.
And so that was important, and it was important to have acquired someone. You are gifted musically, and you helped our parish.
It was wonderful.
Yeah,
we all grew so much together.
Yeah, to be established, and that's a big deal. Founding a parish, you probably considered a founder. And the other thing you mentioned, you wanted to talk about feast day celebrations, and especially nativity. Was there some special traditions, or?
Well, feast days were just to the hilt. Monks have a hard life, and they really work at not avoiding the hard stuff. So when feast days come, whether it was preceded by a fast or not, they really make it special, so that your usual obediences, you don't have to do them. That's big, if for a young man struggling in these really rough conditions. I mean, for decades all they had was a pump, and you had to go and pump every drop of water that you needed for garden, for washing, for dishes and cooking. It was rusty. It was full of minerals. It tasted bad. You'd literally have like a layer this thick on the bottom of the water pitchers by the end of trapeza
of
stuff just
silt?
settling out.
Really?
Yeah. It was rough.
Yeah.
There were, only really rustic outhouses that, they'd toss ashes in, but they weren't like the ones these days where they get emptied out by some truck. They were just like horrible, malodorous pits of grossness.
What was the purpose of the ashes?
To absorb and dry out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Cuts down on bacteria and just things festering. And, the summers they're hot and, okay, here's one great story that I have. And then we'll get back to I'll try to make it quick. A skunk fell into one of the pits, into one of the latrines, and they couldn't get it out. They couldn't get it to climb up a stick. They couldn't grab it. They couldn't figure it out. And so finally, Abbot Herman then said, somebody has to go in and rescue the poor creature. And he asked for volunteers, and Father Sergius volunteered. Now, Father Sergius was the sickliest among them. He was a wonderful cook. He was almost like a real life Goofy. If you've watched the Goofy movie, just good-hearted, chuckled at everything, serious when it needed to be, fiercely loyal, just wonderful, wonderful man. And he decided he would be the one to do it. So he went in there and he rescued this poor creature. He was up to his chest.
Oh, no.
Seriously. Yeah. And he rescued this poor thing and got it out. It sprayed him several times while he was doing it. So he was sick as a dog for like a week or more. And so for years after that, and even now, I still tell the story and let people know that at least if things are going bad, at least you're not the monk and the skunk. So feast days, especially nativity. Nativity was a 24-hour thing. It would start with the royal hours, which would last for a couple of hours with all the readings. And then there would be a break where you'd be doing cleaning or cooking or etc., wrapping presents. You would be going back to church. I'm not going to go through I'll mess it up anyway. But it was a full schedule of services. And after Vespers, you had the first feast, which was 12 dishes that were all postny. They were all Lenten. And so this could be, you know, a little thing of pickles and some potatoes and da-da-da-da-da-da, but it was all Lenten, but it was a feast day. So it was still fish because you were in the forefeast. So you got fish, and you'd have this big feast, and then you'd take a break, little rest, and you'd come back at 9 to do Vespers. Or no, there was Vesper liturgy. Anyways, they would have a full all-night vigil, just like at Pascha. This was a Russian thing that used to go on more often in parishes, and it's sort of been phased out.
Okay,
But especially in a monastery, you just went full hilt, and you went all night. And after the liturgy, after the matins, middle of the night, we would do a procession around the whole monastery. And they had this lantern that was shaped like a star. It had the 8-pointed star cut out all around it, either in wood or sometimes it was tin painted, with a lantern in the middle. You'd blow out all the candles and you'd process with the first star. And at Platina, we would sing Christmas carols all around. We would mix it in with the troparia, but we didn't repeat the troparia 30 or 50 times. We would cycle through all the Western Christmas carols they could think of. So, you know, usually one of the first ones was "It came upon a midnight clear," talking about the star and talking about the angels, and move on to, you know, Hallelujah and Gloria, and we go through the snow. It's, you know, moonlit night. It was just magic. And you'd get back to church, and then you'd start the liturgy, and you'd get done around dawn, and then you'd break fast, and you'd have 12 more dishes. But these were all non-Lenten. So by the end of all that, you're just happy and stuffed and opening presents. And that was where I met my wife. When I met my wife was at that feast.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Platina, Christmases, Nativity are in my bones and my heart. Beloved memories there.
Okay. There is a comment from Alexis Williams who says, Father Sergius, do you know this? Do you know Alexis?
Yes. We were kids who grew up running around in Platina together.
He says, Father Sergius is back in Reading and attached to the monastery again. He is also very ill and needs prayers.
Thank you. And Father Vladimir Anderson was his dad of blessed memory eternal. Also a wonderful priest, another one of those priests that told me I would be a priest someday. And he had a wonderful little publishing house down there.
Oh, okay. Did it? What was the name of it? Or I'd be curious.
I'm dredging that one up.
Some of these books are like, you know, all these books that were like published during those years that you were there. They're all like collector's items now.
Oh, I know.
They're going for like hundreds of dollars online.
Yeah.
And St. Herman books, they're rare to find. People don't give people. I mean, I think probably just because they sit on people's bookshelves, they don't want to. You know, you get an Orthodox book. It's not like another book. You don't take it down to the bookstore when you're done with it. It's parked on your shelf, and you just keep it. You know.
Yeah. Russia's Catacomb Saints is making its rounds through our parish right now. I'm not sure who has it at the moment, but it's too good to keep to yourself.
So the Nativity sounds like almost like a Pascha, it was another
very
Pascha.
Similar.
Huh.
We always spent Pascha down in San Francisco at our parish. So I was up there for one Pascha one year, and it was unbelievable. We literally had an earthquake about 20 minutes before the reading of the gospel, where the stone was rolled away from the tomb by an earthquake. It was unbelievable. Pascha. So grace-filled. It was just like the other world was right there. And that was a lot of what it was like there. The other world was right there. And Father Seraphim was like that. I mean, that's why they called the book Not of This World. He was just like, when I thought about the things that I remember about Father Seraphim the most, it's the look in his eyes. And other people have mentioned it. I mean, he had very beautiful blue eyes, very direct gaze, very calm demeanor, unconcerned with how he looked. He had those dreads in his beard that at first are just like, whoa, this is weird. Completely unconcerned and did not like attention. This thing with putting him on T-shirts and making pictures of him, he would have hated it. It's okay. He doesn't hate it now, I'm sure. But, when people, one thing my mom shared to me, we came back one time and I was like, I can't believe Father Seraphim. He was standing in front of the royal doors, picking his nose. Did you see that? And my mom said, oh, yeah, I saw it. I don't see how anybody could have missed it. He's like literally picking boogers and flicking them in church. And I was just like, I don't get it. I don't get it. He's so reverent. He's so, occasionally I'd serve in the altar with both of them. It was, and my mom said, I think he was doing it on purpose. I think people just start putting him on a pedestal and he hates it. He wasn't above completely humbling himself and doing something ridiculous to get the eyes off him or to knock down people's expectation or fascination. Dad's godfather. Yes, sorry. I as soon as I said your name and then Father Vladimir Anderson, I was like, that's not the right last name. Thank you.
For the people who are listening on audio only, it is Father Vladimir was Alexis's dad's godfather. His bookshop was called Eastern Orthodox Books.
Very good.
Do you know Shani? She says, my mom said, like, he would look at you and see your soul.
Yes. Shani and I grew up together too.
Okay. Maybe he had a spirit of peace like his patron saint.
Certainly sometimes. Sometimes he was like a thundercloud. He was scary when he was displeased. But he didn't get upset about dumb stuff. It was important stuff.
Oh, okay.
You read some of his early writings where he was, tussling with this person or that person about what they wrote about this or that. And he doesn't pull punches.
Right. That's for sure. I did want to actually ask you about that. I, at one point, how should I go about asking this? So I have heard, say again?
Cross yourself.
I have heard the opinion that Father Seraphim caused a scandal by having a theological discussions publicly in his printed, in the Orthodox Word. And I am not aware what, I understand that it was almost like an East Coast, West Coast beef, because there was a monastery on the East Coast that they were having a public theological it's not unlike what goes on Twitter today, right, where people will have theological disagreements and public outfalling, people who are in the church have fallings out with each other, which is unfortunate.
Yep.
So do you have any insight? Do you even know anything about this? What was the scandal? What was
well, there were more than one, and the first thing I would say is that once you published something into the public, you were fair game as far as Father Seraphim was concerned.
Okay.
If you put it out there for public consumption, you were fair game, and he could refute, argue. He was a scholar,
right?
So that's how he saw it. Okay. He had a very traditional way of looking at that, and it's completely valid from an Orthodox standpoint, from a patristic standpoint, but from a modern let's all play nice standpoint, it was sometimes a shock for some people, especially people who had a following and weren't used to being challenged. So there was some things with the Greek church that he disagreed with strongly that led to some real bitterness over some years. There were some things with Father Schmemann that he really disagreed with and warned
Oh,
that he
okay.
was going in a wrong direction, and that caused some waves.
Okay,
So I
gotcha.
don't know, there is one sort of in the beginning of his little booklet, which I highly recommend. It's one that I give out to a lot of people if I have extras. God's Revelation to the Human Heart is just a wonderful little, that lecture converted, that abbot and that bishop and
Hmm.
those priests came from that lecture. So
Hmm.
that's one of those ones that was captured that is quintessential Father Seraphim, and it has a preface that goes over some of those things that were happening then in a good way that's not too
Okay.
contentious or
Right.
so I would recommend taking a look at that to just get a feel for it. There's not much point in going into all of it at
Right.
this point.
But the moral of the story is towards the end of his life, he actually repented of some of the public, um,
Yeah,
haymakers or whatever you would call it. I don't
right,
know.
right.
Is that correct? Like he felt
I
like,
believe
well,
so.
I could have been a little more gentle or something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Years after Father Seraphim reposed, now my mom and Father Herman were like this. I mean, probably he wasn't closer to anyone than her. She just happened to be at the right place at the right time, kind of thing. Here's my mom and Father Herman, dear. This is Extinct Skeet in 2003. And here they are. This is my mom and my brother and Father Herman at the Platina store getting mail. That's Transfiguration, 2006. They were very close. And once, when there's sort of these peaks and ebbs and flows in sort of adulation of Father Seraphim. And one was happening around the 90s. We were going to Russia and spread, when I say we, I went once. But we were going to Russia to bring books either behind the Iron Curtain when it was still communist led, and right after. I mean, we were literally in Moscow the day the tanks rolled onto the White House, and it was sort of the end of communism in the summer of '91.
You mean, was it Red Square or the Kremlin, or was it
The White House.
the White House?
Yeah, where Yeltsin was.
Oh, he was there. Okay.
Right. And so they put up a blockade, and there was a lot of hubbub, but 2 blocks away, grannies were still going shopping. It was that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
The thirst for Father Seraphim was really great. And, so some people wanted to put him on a pedestal again.
Mm-hmm.
And we're losing sight of the fact that he had a life before his ordination and that he had been through it, that he'd really gone through some real terrible struggles, and he'd renounced a lot and was repenting for a lot. And this is not me talking, this is, my reading of the Holy Fathers, you get addicted to repentance, where you do it enough and you just want to do it all the time. And I think as you dig deeper and you scrape through the layers of your own heart, that you get to things that you have felt justified for many years, and you realize you didn't have that justification. And I think Father Seraphim was going through that. Father Herman certainly did. Spent years and years in the woods, not seeing anyone, and just repenting and praying. And I think a lot of monks go through that as they go through life. I think it's a natural thing. Hopefully we're allowed to do it too. So to get back to your question, which was, his repentance, I think it makes absolute sense. And yes.
Okay.
And so, and the little anecdote I have for that was my mom once asked, she shared this with me. They were all alone and there was nobody there to feel offended. And she said, Father Herman, forgive me, but I want to make sure I'm remembering correctly. Was Father Seraphim sometimes a bit of a sourpuss? And what she means is kind of a jerk about things.
Hmm.
And Father Herman looked at her and said, "My dear, total sourpuss." So he would get in his moods, right? He's a man.
Okay. So now that you're on Father Herman, we're talking about Father Seraphim a lot, but
Yeah.
Father Herman was a very important. I mean, can we say a little more about him, maybe? Because I've met people who were his spiritual children, who thought very highly of him as a spiritual father.
Yeah.
I've met multiple people, in my life as an Orthodox.
Right.
Can you say something about
And
Father
I've met
Herman?
people who have said terrible things about him.
Yeah, that too. I've heard that too.
Condemnation of all kinds. Yeah. He was pretty unique. He was very charismatic in that he, not in a manipulative way, although he could do that too, but just that he made a real connection with everyone and could see the state that they were in and help them almost immediately. I will say right off the bat that he was certainly righteous, certainly had the grace of God. I experienced miracles with him. I experienced clairvoyance with him. And I experienced great consternation and real disappointments and hurts from him too. After Father Seraphim died so suddenly, he was undone. He had no idea what to do next. The first time we visited after Father Seraphim's funeral, we were in the altar. We had finished the service. Everyone else had left. I was helping clean up. And he said, "This is the only place I feel close to Father Seraphim." And I said, "Me too." And he just came over and just fell on the floor at my feet. This big man with his mantilla and his klobuk and his cross and his just, this noble, powerful figure just crumbled at my feet. And he just hung on to me like driftwood in a storm and just sobbed. I was like 10 or 11, 12. He was so wrecked by that. He had lost his best friend, his spiritual co-struggler, just everything that they were such a team. They were so perfectly balanced. And he was in a tailspin. And I think too many people asked too many things of him too soon. He just didn't have enough time to grieve or to contemplate or to gather himself together. And so he just put his foot down and said, "No, I'm not going to do any of what you people are telling me, especially if it goes against what Vladika John told me to do. I'm on my own now. I'm the only one left who can do it." And, after that, my mom, of all people, was chosen to be a messenger between the current Archbishop and Father Herman. She'd take letters back and forth. That's one of the reasons we visited so often. We never knew it was in them, but we could see the aftermath. Father Herman would get very sad, very grief, full of just heaviness, or he'd be angry, or he'd be stiff, or he'd be, just reacting. And we'd go back home in a couple of days with a letter. It was exhausting. It just was like tearing you apart. I'd go home and I'd hear priests at the Sabor at our cathedral saying terrible things and how he just betrayed us all and blah, blah, blah. And I'd go up there and it would be Father Herman saying nasty things about the priest or the bishop. And I would just be like, It was awful.
So
thank God it wasn't everybody who had to hear that. I don't know why Mom and I had to go through it, but we did. And, we got good. For some reason, we were allowed to keep doing that. And we got good guidance from both ends of how to keep it together, I think. And so we just kept going, even after he was defrocked, even after he was sort of trying to find somebody's antimons to serve with. And, there were ups and downs. And, eventually I had to stop receiving his blessing. He wasn't a priest in my jurisdiction, and that was super hard. He was really hurt. But I would still bow, take his hand, and I'd just put my forehead against it. I wouldn't kiss it. That was as much as I could do. I couldn't stop completely. So, and I talked to people that were at his funeral, and they said it was glorious, filled with light. So,
and he had Orthodox. Did he have an Orthodox funeral?
He did. He wasn't allowed to be buried at Platina, unfortunately.
Okay.
He's down in Santa Rosa, his remains.
Gotcha.
But Orthodox funeral, absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that. So it sounds like Father Herman kind of came undone after Father Seraphim's passing.
Yeah.
And
for a few years there, Orthodox Word had a lot of, editorial stuff that you might as well just throw those pages away. It was just like, some bishops say somewhere, and of course we all know who he's talking about. It's just, yeah.
All right.
Even to their own, that was one reason that they republished Not of This World, because it had a whole chapter of just, stuff that was poisoned by that period. And
Alexis says the new patriarch of Bulgaria served his funeral. I believe it's Daniel.
That's right. I'd forgotten that.
Okay. So people gloss over this. I want to address it quickly. The monastery, St. Herman of Alaska Monastery, did leave the canonical church for a period of years, right? They were under a bishop who was not supposed to be a bishop, and they didn't know that. Oh, they didn't know.
So you could technically say that.
So they were they thought they were. Okay, I didn't know that.
When you go shopping around for any bishop that will take you because you are radioactive and nobody wants to touch you in America, you're going to end up sometimes, and this was a bishop who was a bad one. He was from Greece. He was in Greece. And he came to the U.S. He actually, just by chance, there's no chance, but he came to the community up in Vancouver, BC, where my wife was when she was 16 or so, right after she got baptized. And he ordained her a reader because nobody else could do it. You don't ordain women to a reader. But my wife didn't know any better, right? She's just a 16-year-old girl who's like, okay, I better learn all these books and learn all the tones. And she did. She carried that choir for several years, just sort of by herself. And then they found out that this bishop wasn't even a bishop. He had been defrocked, and he was arrested on child molestation. So he was a bad one.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't know any of that. That's how the enemy works, right? Let's have this person accuse this monk of something. Oh, and then let's get him to sign up with this bishop who's going to turn out to this, because the enemy knows all that stuff going on in the background.
Okay.
And it sets up for what? Looks really suspicious, right? No.
All right. And then in 2000, the monastery went under the Serbian church.
Yeah, that was when my godfather was the abbot. That was great. That was a great period. While he went and lived at the Kiev Caves, Lavra, for several years, Father Gerasim, and just came back ready, with a new typicon, with a stricter rule, and with just a knowledge of how to help govern this place. And Father Herman was already off site and doing his own sort of recluse thing. And it was just such a blessing. Wonderful.
Okay, so my next question, fastball, is Seraphim Rose a saint?
Probably, although he wouldn't be the one to admit it. So I hang back on that one. I let other people, but I kiss his picture every night. This is the one I keep. And this is my other one. This was the winter after I came up there. And that was a really great winter. That was this was Nativity. And that's that story I told at his 30th anniversary of repose about him throwing the snowball.
Oh, right. Do
Yeah.
you want to recount that?
Well, we were, it was Nativity Day. We were in the monastery, and a bunch of the kids got together and decided to have a big snowball fight. And we got together these piles of snowballs, all our ammo, and we were about to start. And we were inside the gate in the large clearing that's between the gate and the church, with the east wing and the refectory. So this big sort of open area. And we had built forts and everything. And Father Seraphim came along, and he saw what we were doing, and he said, "Stop, you can't do that." And we were like, "No." And I said, "Well, even if it's Nativity, I mean, it's a feast day." And he said, "It's still an act of war, and you can't play war, and you can't do that inside the gates of the monastery, but you can do it outside the monastery." So he helped us carry all of our snowballs out there. And one of the girls asked him if he wanted to throw a snowball, and he just sort of looked kind of sad, like disappointed, like we would even ask. This comes back to that little sourpuss comment a little bit. But then he sort of shrugged, and he picked up a snowball, and he looked at a tree that was about 50 feet away, and he just became utterly still. He looked like he was about to do a fastball pitch, which made sense because I think he played, I want to say football, baseball? In high school or college or something. I don't know. Anyways, he sure looked like it. He just became absolutely still. And then he just wound up for this incredible pitch and just exploded that ball. I mean, he just put all of himself into it. It was just, when I thought about it years after, that was so Father Seraphim. It just, like, all the kids went, "Whoa." I mean, the snowball just went straight as an arrow and hit the tree and just exploded. And it was just like the most perfect snowball shot you'd ever seen. And then he just turned around and walked away. The things you remember when you're a kid, I guess. So, sainthood, certainly among the righteous. He's certainly answered people's prayers. We have plenty of stories of that.
Right.
He's visited people in dreams, including myself. Soon after his death, I had a short dream where no words were spoken. Just came and sat by me, sort of like before my baptism. And I honestly, he's another one. I don't know if I'd be here if it wasn't for his prayers. Really. I don't know if any of St. Herman's would have survived without his prayers. So I have a couple more things to show you.
Oh, right. Please do.
My first nativity, same as that picture, he gave me an icon from Nativity. This was his favorite icon. It's called Unexpected Joy. The story is of a thief who comes into a church to steal the gold around the Theotokos and to steal from the church. And the Theotokos leans out of her icon and says, "What do you think you're doing? You're stealing gold from the church and going to condemn your soul. Save gold up in heaven. Change your life." And he became a monk. And that was his favorite icon and one of his favorite stories. Later, after his death, many years after his death, Father Herman gave my mom the icon that he had in his cell. And I, unworthy as I am, now have it in my house.
Oh, the icon that you just told the story about.
That was his copy. That it was in his cell.
The one you're holding now.
This is it.
Wow.
I'm unworthy, but I keep it safe.
So, did you want to say anything more about his passing? You spoke a few words about that.
His funeral was intense. Off the bat, just to dispel any rumors, he did not smell good.
Okay.
He smelled like hospital. He smelled like decay. And he smelled like the rose oil that the monks from Etna, being good Greeks, came and put wonderful smelling oil all over him, as they do to their monks. The Russians don't. So that's where the wonderful smell came from.
Okay, gotcha.
But he was several days reposed, so he's very cold and stiff, looked a little green around the gills, as they say. But the photos of his face aren't fake. Now, his face changed during the funeral service. I was standing right next to his coffin with my mom. They kind of shoved me up there because, again, I was special because I was the last kid, whatever. And that was my first cadaver, my first dead person that I'd seen. But I stayed there and looked at him throughout, and his face changed during the service. It wasn't just the candles and the shadows. His face really changed. So at one point, he looked really angry, and it was when people were sort of messing with him. They were like, fixing his thing and doing this and trying to make him look good, and he didn't like it.
Oh, gotcha.
They were like, people after they go through rigor mortis are kind of malleable, like wax almost. You can like change their facial stuff. And so they were sort of trying to make him look a little like, instead of just him being him. And there's this horrifying moment that went by. I don't know if anybody else saw it, where I watched his face go from calm to until literally his lip was curled back like in disgust. And then they left him alone and it went back to smooth.
Interesting.
Never forgot that. That was intense. That was crazy for a 9-year-old kid. But Father Herman was a mess. There was tons of priests and bishops, and Father, when they got the coffin up to the burial place, they put the lid on the final time, and Father Herman just started like throwing himself at the coffin, and they were like trying to nail down the lid, and he's like, no. I mean, it was just off. It was so tragic. It was so sad. Everybody was just sobbing, and Father Herman lost it. He was inconsolable. And then he pulled it together somehow and was like totally functional for a couple of years after that, except for the pressures coming from outside. But when we visited, he was just like, he was pretty much his same self. I mean, sadder, looked older, tireder, but God gave him the grace, that's for sure. Because they just kept publishing, and they just kept carrying on. I don't know. An hour and 10 minutes is probably enough for anybody. Right?
You want to close it down? We can. I think
I'm up. I can talk all night. You know me.
I didn't
love hearing the voice.
You wanted. I don't know I think you kind of talked about this a little bit. I forgot. I passed over the question or you had mentioned you wanted to talk about day-to-day laborers, but after that, we can pass on that if you don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it with how you give kids little things to make them feel important and invested, and adults too, and he'd make up little nicknames and things, and Father Seraphim liked that too. It just wasn't his shtick, but he was smiling along with it. So very tenderhearted.
I guess, here's a question from the audience, and if anyone else in the audience has a question, now is the time. I know I should have given you a few minutes to think about that. I should have warned the audience. But now is the time to put a question in the chat. Steven says, how did they end up as a Serbian church?
I do not know that story too well, although I was there while it was happening. One thing that happened that was an amazing boon for everyone involved was that this loosely affiliated church group It was called the Brotherhood of Man, and then called the Brotherhood, and then called something. And my mom grew up in that group. No, it wasn't a cult. It wasn't. It was a bunch of really sincere people searching really diligently. They somehow, on the West Coast, there was several little groups, and they found out about Platina, and they were searching for Christianity, the original Christianity, and all at once, a whole bunch of them, through Father Herman's instruction and guidance, came in to Orthodoxy. And the way they did it was they got introduced to Orthodoxy, and many of them got baptized by local priest or Father Herman or somebody. God knows what bishop he was under when he did it. He baptized people whether he was under a bishop or not. He just would. I mean, when we went to, he probably baptized almost 40 people one morning in the Volga River when we were in Russia in 1991. He and this other priest on this dock, and we were right at the Kiji ancient churches, and they opened one up for us, and we went in and we served a liturgy for the first time in like 80 years in this little wooden church. And Father Herman just made it all happen. And it was the grace of God. He didn't make it happen. It's just, he said, we need a church. We have these Baptist people. And the docent for the museum, would say, well, I've got the key. I mean, I guess we're going to need, and it would just happen. So I don't even remember what it was. Oh, how did they end up in the Serbian church? Well, after that influx of those people, they all went back out and they found different jurisdictions to serve with. And some of them went to the Serbian church. And I think the connections there, plus Father Gerasim coming back from Russia and being trained and ready for the priesthood, was made a priest by the Serbians and something like that. But,
okay. I don't know if anyone can hear this, but my blinds are slamming against the windows.
I was wondering what that was.
I should have maybe yanked that blind up. I actually closed it right before the stream started. So let's see. Okay, so no more questions from the audience. And so I have my last question. I'd like to thank you for coming on and spending this time with us and answering my sometimes difficult questions. The question that I have, that I ask people who are in the ranks of the clergy, and you're a minor clergy, give us a word to live by. Leave us with some word of advice, please, if you could.
Father Seraphim understood what we were going through, and he left all these instructions for us, but none of it does any good if we're telling ourselves we're something we're not. And what we are is animated dirt. And we have to remember that for anything else to happen, to become something more than that.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, this has been Young Penitent with...
I got one more thing I have to say.
Yeah, please.
I have to put a plug in for what I feel is the quintessential book. If you are over 10 years of Orthodox age, buy this book. Don't put it off. It's one of the most important books you will ever read.
Ooh.
Okay?
Yes. I have read that book. That's probably the book I've read the most. I have a tally going on the inside cover, and it's up to like 6 or something, like 6 times that I've read that book.
Good for you. It's that kind of book. You just keep going back. Okay,
so the book he recommended was Unseen Warfare, and so I also recommend that book. And Orthodox Boomer Grandma says, "Holy Saint Seraphim of Platina, pray to God for us."
Amen.
Amen. I have nothing to say against that. People know that I would support Father Seraphim's glorification.
As would I.
I do support it. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yep.